The world is indeed full of peril, and in it there are many dark places. But still there is much that is fair, and though in all lands love is now mingled with grief, it grows perhaps the greater. Hey everyone, Yoyston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today we are going to try something new. While we have our usual types of videos on the channel, I always think it is good to explore new ways of delving into Middle-earth. Recently, I've been contemplating ways to look at lesser-known places, characters, and ideas in videos, and to see if you all like that sort of exploration. So today we are going to group a few places I have slightly, if at all ever, talked about from Middle-earth together and look at them and their lore, as well as some of the things that may have been going on there. Related articles and videos that were helpful sources for today's video are in the description and cards, my friends. Thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. The Ettenmoors, meaning high barren land, or Trollfells, meaning troll hills, was a wild and dangerous place throughout the history of Middle-earth. Set between the Trollshaws and the lands of Angmar to the north, it was a highland area on the southern side of the mountains of Angmar. It is possible, as it is shown in some game adaptations, that Mount Graham, of which we know for their goblins, was also in the Ettenmoors, and perhaps Mount Graham was one of those northern mountains. There were subregions in the Ettenmoors, including the Coldfells and lands about the Horwell River, and it went by other names such as the Ettendales and Trollfells. This land was, other than Angmar, likely the most innately dangerous region in Eriador during the Third Age, as it was infested with trolls, and some trolls who came down to other lands like the Trollshaws. Concerning its known history, I would imagine it's likely that the scouts from Rivendell and soldiers of Angmar may have seen conflict here during the Angmar War, as Angmar laid siege to Imladris, but we definitely know that the Witch King fled here after the Battle of Fornost and his flight from Earnur and Glorfindel. And then, centuries later, Eredor, chieftain of the Dunedain and grandfather of Aragorn, was also slain by hill trolls of the Coldfells here in the Ettenmoors in 2930. This would also mean that there were likely multiple kinds of trolls to be found here. Finally, in late 3018, no scouts from Rivendell found anything concerning the movements of the enemy in that land. Likely it would remain a wild and dangerous land to travelers, only to perhaps be tamed in the world of men. This land has seen lots of love in game adaptations, like War in the North, and in the Lord of the Rings Online as well, where it serves as the player versus monster player map, and so forth. Moving far to the north of even the Ettenmoors, Forodwaith, better known as the Northern Waste, has even less lore that I can speak to. The name Forodwaith comes from the northern peoples that used to dwell there, whose remnants are the Losoth of the Ice Bay of Forokel. It seems that the Cold is also a remnant of the realm and fortresses of Morgoth, most likely a tomb no more than Angband, for Angband was likely further to the northwest. If there were any great deeds that occurred in these lands, we know very little about them. It seems that the storm that blew the elf lord Amroth's ship away into the Bay of Belfalas in 1981 of the Third Age originated in Forodwaith, meaning that the cold weather of these northern wastes had an impact even that far south. Perhaps even the northern drakes of the Withered Heath and Grey Mountains could be found here as well, I'm unsure. Whether any of our characters from any story ever journeyed here, I am also unsure. According to Frodo's poem for Gandalf, the wizard potentially did, but I wonder if, when he referred to Northern Waste in that poem, it was much more of a poetic mantra rather than a physical place, for I'm unsure as to why any of our characters would even have a reason to go there, even Gandalf. Speaking of the Bay of Belfalas, a very similar region that is curious and rather unexplored in the lore is Anfalas, meaning longshore or beach, or Langstrand. This was the coastal region in the southwestern part of Gondor. According to the Gondorians of the Third Age, it seems that the land may have once been inhabited by elves, which is not too far from the mark, as Ethelond, which was nearby in Belfalas, was indeed inhabited by elves. If I were to guess, these elves of Anfalas would have been the Green Elves during the Elder Days. The green forested lands near the shores were certainly perfect for them, and for the men that came after. It was between the rivers Lefnui and Morthond, south of the hills of Pinathgelen, east of the Cape of Andrast, and it was home to small villages of Gondor, and likely a mixture of those with Middlemen blood and Dunedain blood, probably with more of the former. I would not be surprised if Druedain also lived in these lands. Yet even in these more isolated areas, the Corsairs of Umbar would raid them, both after the Great Plague, which ended in 1637, and during the War of the Ring in 3019. Since this area was rather small in its population, there was a singular lord that we know of, Lord Galaskiel, who took men from the region to defend Minas Tirith during the war. Far to the northwest of Anfalas, we have Minhiriath, which means between the rivers. Though we hear little about this region in Middle-earth, it seems to have been actually a rather important land due to the presence of one of those two rivers especially. While some men who came to dwell there in the days of old were alike to the House of Halath, the later days would see Númenóreans establish settlements such as Tharbad up the Grey Flood River, which was deepened for greater ship access in the Second Age, and the ship port of Vignalande, later Lond Dire, as well at the mouth of the river. During the Age, there were once many trees, and a great deal of these were cut and used for shipbuilding by the Númenóreans, who established their settlements there. Yet, during the War of the Elves and Sauron, some of the raiders of Mordor would invade here as well. But Tharbad would actually play a pretty important strategic role in the defeat of Sauron during that war. This region also certainly represented some differences between those with the blood of middlemen and those with Dunedain blood, as some of the older inhabitants would live in the forests, such as Eren Vorn, and would be driven deeper into their woods by the devastation of their lands, both by the hands of men and Sauron's fires, even though they might have hoped and even helped Sauron against the Númenórean colonists. By the Third Age, much of Minhiriath was grasslands and plains, while some parts still had dense forests. The Greenway Road would be eventually built to connect Arnor and Gondor, and this region would be claimed by Arnor and later the petty kingdom Cardolan. But due to depopulation and the Great Plague in 1636, most of Minhiriath was deserted, except for the hunters of the forest. The fell winter's thawing in 2911 would also see devastating floods, ruining Tharbad and its bridge. Some major characters would pass through here in 3018, the Nazgul on their way to the Shire over Sarn Ford, a ford connecting the River Entwine held by the Dunedain, and Boromir, who went through Tharbad on his way to Rivendell, as the destroyed bridge allowed for a ford. Beyond this, we can be sure that Minhiriath, or at least parts of it, entered into Aragorn's reunited kingdom, and the new Dunedain would surely take the time to rebuild and restore their lands of old. Finally, for our last land to explore in this video, I want to jump far across the world of Middle-earth, into northeastern Rovanion, to the land of Dorwinion, meaning Young Land Country. Now, multiple writings of Tolkien refer to this land, but at different geographic locations, as perhaps the name is used to describe multiple places. But the one we refer to here seems to be on the edge of Rhûn, and perhaps the northwestern edge of the Sea of Rhûn. And it was a land where excellent wine was made. Due to the Sindarin name for it, and the fact that Thranduil included the wine during his feasts at the time of the Hobbit in 2941, and the Wood Elves traded for it, Dorwinion was certainly one of the most eastern places with western influences still in it in Middle-earth. It seems that, since they used the river running for trade, it was indeed located on those northwestern shores of the Sea of Rhûn. For a time at least, during Gondor's golden years, or perhaps even at multiple times in Gondor's history when its borders expanded far to the east, it is likely that some of the lands of Dorwinion came under the reign of Gondor. Yet the power of Gondor would eventually be pushed back by their enemies. Yet the wine of Dorwinion, regardless of the political sphere the land was in at a given time, would be forever renowned and known in Middle-earth. Since this was the case, we can actually even assume that perhaps Dorwinion maintained something of a state of neutrality during the history of the world, for its wine made its way into many different lands. Likely this would continue to be the case on into the Fourth Age. With all of this said, I think this is a great place to wrap up our first look into the lesser-known lands of Middle-earth. From this tale, we see that all worlds and lands have much nuance, and lore which is worthy of consideration and exploration. They are never as simple as they may seem at first. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts on these lesser-known lands? Let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you'd like to see a part 2 of this. There are many more lands we could explore. I'm trying to approach all of these lands as though I'm doing little region spotlights, so I hope you guys enjoyed this new method. Let me know if you'd like to see something similar for lesser-known characters as well. I appreciate it. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Weta or United Cutlery Lord of the Rings swords, statues, and other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping. Use the code WEST at checkout. Please check out our merch and Patreon. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members: Peter Shepard, Jonathan Putnam, Blair Scouten, Merton, John Hume, Sam McBee, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Anna Petrolik, Anthony Harmon, Arthur Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswald Project, Robert Bogue, King of Games 2500, and Theodore, our newest Valar tier patron. Thank you so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video on how important Staffs of the Wizards really were. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.